Advertised charging speeds are kind of misleading or deceiving, just like advertised range, and we got a video about that, so there should be a link popping up at the top. If not, look down below in the description. So if you look into buying an EV, you might look into charging speed because you want to travel, and higher charging speed is probably the way to go, so you don't have to sit at the charger as long. But that number may be quite deceiving. So it depends a little bit on how the manufacturer even states the charging speed. The most common way is in kilowatts. So there's a number anywhere from around 50 to like 350 kilowatts that they state as a charging speed. But you would think the higher the speed, the faster your car will be done at a charger, right? Well, not necessarily. There's many other factors that play into this, especially temperature. Battery temperature is a huge factor, but then also ambient temperature, your outside temperature, because if the charger is already extremely hot because it's 110 or more degrees Fahrenheit out there, well, it may not be able to charge as fast because everything is so hot, which heat is higher resistance, which means basically slower charging, more losses. And as you start charging, everything gets hotter and hotter, and it's pretty hard on the equipment. So most equipment is actually water cooled or has a coolant. It's not really water, but a lot of those chargers have a coolant of sorts in there, and they have big old fans, and quite frequently you will hear those big old fans blow. They're pretty noisy. Some of them even have cables that are cooled, so liquid is running through the cable that goes to your car in order to keep it cooler, in order to keep the charging speeds up higher. Then there's other manufacturers that give you a different type of charging speed indication. They may say it takes 30 minutes from 20% to 80%. Others say from 0 to 90. Others say whatever, another range in there and another time. So that's another option to advertise charging speed. And obviously that's pretty cool if you, 20% to 80%, 30 minutes, that okay, sounds reasonable. But does that mean you're going to get that charging speed every time? No, unfortunately not. Again, other things play a role in this. Temperature, mainly. So there we go again. You can't expect that speed to be there either, just like the kilowatt number may not be there either. So there's probably other ways that they advertise it to, ways that I haven't seen yet. If you know of any, leave a comment down below. There's endless ways to talk about charging speed. The latest and greatest in regards to charging speed is an 800 volt battery architecture. And yes, that can improve charging speeds because as we increase the voltage, basically our amperage drops, and thus we have less heat loss, and we can charge a little faster. But even those cars don't necessarily charge as fast as they say they can. And why not? Well, again, temperature is a factor no matter what. It always plays a factor. But with those batteries, definitely the equipment that is supposed to charge the car needs to be the appropriate size and be able to provide what this car is asking for. And currently, there are many charging stations that cannot sustain or even provide to begin with enough power to charge those cars that fast. So temperature is a huge concern. Why? Because temperature affects, first of all, resistance. The higher the temperature in an electric conductor, the higher the resistance. So the more power, pressure, voltage it takes to push it through fast. And trying to push it through there, because it has resistance, it heats up even more, and it's just a really bad cycle. So that is one of the big things there. But then it's temperature of the battery pack as well. Interestingly, lithium battery packs, if they're at a very high temperature, they can accept an extremely fast charge without really being damaged. But the temperature has to be controlled exactly, and the battery pack has to be cooled down immediately after charging to a normal temperature. Otherwise, it's going to damage the battery pack. And that's what people refer to as preconditioning the battery. Tesla probably came up with that initially, and they started at some point, they had a software update, and from there on, batteries would precondition as you would navigate to a supercharger. And it would heat up that battery extremely hot. And then once you come to the supercharger and you plug in, depending on the state of charge, it would be able to max out that charger. And with Tesla, that would be either 150 kilowatt or 250 kilowatts. And so if properly preconditioned and the state of charge being really low, extremely low, below 10%, it will max out. But if you drive to a supercharger, and even though your state of charge is really low, but your temperature is not up, it will not max out. And then the other way around, even if the temperature is perfect, but your state of charge is high, it will not max out, because at a higher state of charge, a battery cannot take all that power all at once. That's like filling a glass of water. If the glass of water is empty, you can start pouring really fast in the beginning, but as the glass fills up and comes to the top, you got to slow down more and more and more, otherwise it's going to overflow. That's the same thing with a battery. In the beginning, if the battery is almost empty, we can push in a lot of power, but as it fills up, we got to slow down. And that's what people refer to as a charge curve. So that's another way to look at charging speed, is a charge curve. And so you can look at that. Basically, you will have kilowatts and you will have time. And so initially it will ramp up slowly, come up pretty high, and then start going slowly back down with most cars. But there's different charging curves on different cars. Some of them, like the Chevy Bolt that we have, if we come into a charger at 10% or less, we plug in, it will ramp up really quick to about 50 kilowatts. Then it will stay there till about 80% or so. And then it will slowly drop off until 100%, where we have maybe only 5-10 kilowatts going in at that time. So, but it goes about 50 kilowatts till 80%. So that's really good. Now, other cars like this Tesla that I'm sitting in, this 2013 Model S 85, it basically can do about 120 kilowatts max. But I think the highest I've ever seen was like 117 or something. And that's just for a second. And then it already starts dropping. And it drops rapidly on these older Tesla down to about 80 kilowatts. And 80 kilowatts ain't so much anymore. And this here has an 85 kilowatt hour battery. So you're going to be charging for an hour to fill this up. And the Bolt has a 66 kilowatt hour battery, goes at 50 kilowatt hours almost all the way. It takes about a little bit more than an hour to fully charge. So you can see, even though this car here has a higher speed than the Bolt, it still takes the same amount of time to fill up. And that's where you got to look into things. So this charging curve is pretty important. But most manufacturers do not necessarily advertise the charging curve. Some do. But what they advertise is, again, on the best conditions. Are you always on the best conditions? No, not at all, because you don't always come to a DC fast charger at 5 or 10%. You may get there at 40%, but you will have to fill up there, maybe even to 100%, so you can get from this charger to the next charger. Today, we still have a lack of chargers, unfortunately, and hopefully that will improve here in hopefully no time. There's lots of incentives out there, so hopefully that will go pretty quick here, that we have more of those available. But yeah, you may have to pull into a charger at 40 or 50% and fill up. And if you pull in at 40 or 50%, even if the car is advertised to go 350 kilowatts, well, if you come in at 40 or 50%, it's probably only gonna go at 180 maybe. And you will gain relatively quick, and it will drop off relatively quick. And again, temperature matters. So if the car is one of those cars that preconditions and it had enough time to precondition, it will go a little bit faster, but still you won't get the full speed. And that is important to understand. Even if some car manufacturers advertise 250 kilowatts or 350 kilowatts, you won't get that full speed unless you're down in the single digits, maybe up to 20%. And then most of them already start throttling, and they will drop down lower and lower. And so even if it has a maximum charge speed that is extremely high, it may not charge much faster than another car that has a lower charging speed, but that other car keeps the lower charging speed up for a long time. I believe the Audi e-tron is a good example for that. It doesn't have super high fast charging. I think it's only 150 kilowatts, but it goes up there, stays up there really, really long, till like 70% or more. And that makes it fast again, because it stays up there like an almost straight line and then starts dropping off. And especially if you don't need to charge to 100%, if 70 or 80% is all you need, then that car may be faster than another car that charges at 250 kilowatts advertised speed, because that car may go up to 250 and then drop off very rapidly, and actually maybe even drop below 150 kilowatts, while that Audi may stay up there and go like a straight line. There are so many factors that affect DC fast charging, it's not even funny. If you're not into EVs like I am, or many of our viewers are, that are, you know, nerds, geeks, whatever you want to call us, you may think this is extremely difficult. And it is definitely more difficult than filling up a gas car or understanding on how fast you can fill up your EV. But that said, important is, don't focus just on the charging speed. If you look at cars and you would say, well, the Bolt sucks because it only goes 50 kilowatts, I'd rather buy this older Tesla that is about the same price. And we have a video on that, a comparison actually between the two. You may want to check that out. But anyway, if you look at an older Tesla like we have here, it's a nice fancy car, cool. It charges faster than the Bolt, advertised only. So this is much better, isn't it? Because it charges faster. No, it does not. As I said earlier, this car takes a good hour to fully charge. The Bolt takes a good hour to fully charge. And they both have the same range. So even though this charges at a higher speed in regards to kilowatts, it is overall slower to charge from 0 to 100% than basically the Bolt. The Bolt is, or it's not slower, but it's the same amount of time roughly for both of them. And the Bolt only charges at 50 kilowatts, while this could go up to 150 kilowatts, but it never really does, and it drops off so quick, and it has a bigger battery. So that's why you can't really compare charging speeds. Now there's another way to compare charging speeds, and sometimes that's advertised, and that is in miles or kilometers that are added in an hour. Now some of them say, well, we can add that much in 10 minutes, because that sounds better if you have a high number in 10 minutes rather than a high number in an hour. An hour is long, right? So some advertise it that way. But again, that number is based on an extremely low state of charge, when they can max out the kilowatts that they advertise. So that could be at the 5% state of charge, you plug in and you can get 350 kilowatts and you're good to go, right? And that is based on kilowatts. They just give it to you in a different number because they assume according to the rated range, you would get so and so many miles per kilowatt hour. So that's how they give you miles or kilometers. For that matter, it's the same thing as a speed. But again, that is only what they advertise, is only on the best conditions, when the battery is at perfect temperature, charging equipment is at perfect temperature, and your state of charge is low. So all these numbers have to be looked at with a grain of salt. Even though some show an extremely high kilowatt number, they're not necessarily faster. They may be a little bit faster, but not as much as it sounds like. Same thing with if they advertise an extremely fast time from 20 to 80%, that may be pretty good. What about if you're lower? What about if you got to go higher? Yeah, there may be a problem there. But no matter what, if the temperature is not right, the outside temperature, and so your charging equipment is too cold, too hot, the battery temperature, battery is too cold, too hot, then it's just not going to go as fast. And if your state of charge is not extremely low, it's not going to max out usually. So anytime you're 40% and up, you're not going to max out the full charging speed, never ever. And so a slower charging car in regards to kilowatts can actually add more miles in the same amount of time as a faster charging car. Because again, a bigger car like this Model S has a bigger battery and it needs a little bit more power. It's a little thirstier, right? To get the same miles as the Bolt. The Bolt is a smaller car, has a smaller battery, it's lighter, and it's not as thirsty as this one here. So it can fill up relatively quick, even at a lower charging speed in regards to kilowatts. It will add on the same amount of miles in the same time as the higher charging speed on this Model S. So if you're looking into buying an EV or getting another EV possibly, charging speed certainly is something to look at, but it's not necessarily a point where you can make a decision and you could say, oh, this car charges faster, so I'm going for this one. That may be actually the wrong decision, because even though this car charges faster, it may sit at the charger the same amount of time as this car over here that charges slower. So it's a little tricky there. So you'd rather focus on the car you want, if the car offers other things that you need. And yeah, you might end up sitting at a charger 5 or 10 minutes longer than the other guy. But you have everything you need in a car, and the car is perfect for you, except for the charging speed. I think that is the way to go, to have the perfect car and a little slower speed, rather than have the faster speed and you're 5 minutes faster, but you're always annoyed by something in the car. But in any event, charging speed, DC fast charging speeds are deceiving, misleading, just like range in EVs. And so don't focus too much on these numbers only. They're definitely part of it. They can be used to compare somewhat, but there's so much more that goes into these numbers, for charging, your state of charge, your battery temperature, your outside temperature. All these things affect all that, and so you will never necessarily see that perfect number that you would like to see, and you might be as slow as the other guy. Well, that's it for today. I hope you got something out of this video. Please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our future videos. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.